Okay, and we are live. Welcome back for the afternoon session of Trotec Live. I'm joined here by Ben Matthews from Bluestar Leasing. Bluestar are our finance supplier of choice. So if you're looking at making a purchase of one of our machines, we would normally recommend Bluestar Leasing, so Ben's company. There is no physical tie-up between the two businesses. We've just worked with Ben for a number of years and find that Bluestar are very receptive, very easy to work with. And there's no financial tie between the two businesses either. So just to make that clear, so Ben is here. He's going to explain how financing works. He's going to explain the latest products and monies available to the UK marketplace. But first off, Ben, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Just tell us a little bit about yourself and about Bluestar so that the people watching. And good afternoon to everybody. Thanks. Continue to comment down in the chat. Sorry, Ben. Off you go.
That's right. Yeah. So thank you very much. So I work for Bluestar Leasing. I have done for over 6 years now. We've had a relationship with Trotec for just over 5 years, and we've worked with many of their customers, doing an awful lot of business between the two companies. So Bluestar are a broker. We're backed by a panel of funders. We also incorporated with our own funding line with a bank, Conister Bank, all part of the Manx Financial Group. And we basically, provide kind of finance for Trotec customers. We can finance, any types of kit, whether it's new or secondhand, and equally we look at kit that people might have bought already. So today we're just going to look at a presentation that we put together to give you an idea of what products are available in the market right now, and the good stuff and the bad stuff.
Bro, top man. Right, I'm going to share my screen for everybody. Like so, that should pop up very shortly. And again, just a point of housekeeping, if to make the screen bigger, if you just double click on it, you should get an icon down at the bottom which sends it full screen, so it'll be easier to read the numbers, etc. But Ben will go through that as we go anyway. So Ben, tell us, why should people be financing lasers, not buying them outright?
So the basic kind of reason that people use finance is to save on cash flow. I don't think now is. I mean, I think now is probably the ultimate reason. With the pandemic that's hit in the last 9 months, is a key reason why cash is so important within a business. So finance enables customers to effectively buy an equipment now and effectively spread the cost over the term, which ranges from anything from 12 months to 60 months. And ultimately, it provides companies the kind of the ultimate opportunity to invest and start earning without paying large sums of money up front. And as with any purchase of any kind of business asset to the business, there are tax advantages. We always say that the best thing for you as a customer to do is discuss this with your accountant. Everybody has their own. Everyone works in different ways, so there's not kind of one set rule. But effectively, what you can do is offset the payments against your corporation tax bill. But as I say, it's worth speaking to your accountant before you kind of go down that kind of route. The one advantage with using a broker or kind of someone outside of your own bank is that banks will have a limit for every business. So whether you're using that for a credit card, an overdraft, cash, loans, whatever you're using, eventually banks will say enough's enough. So the luxury that you have with a broker is that we work with a panel of funders, which enables us to spread the risk for you. So you're not putting all of your risk in one basket. You're kind of spreading that out there, and it also means you can look at lots of different things. So you might be a medium-sized business, but you might be able to get finance in 3 or 4 or 5 different places. Whereas if you stick with your bank, eventually the bank will say enough's enough. And obviously we all know that it's important to have the bank there ready for emergency cases when you may need cash or help with an overdraft, etc. Flexibility. Finance obviously offers you flexibility. You don't have to own the machine at the end. You have that option to own that machine at the end. It also means you can upgrade. So you might be in, you might be in a 4-year agreement. You might be 3 years in and think, actually, I want to upgrade to a bigger machine. There are ways of doing this. There are ways of building in the cost, the cost that you've already accumulated, and things like that. So there are, that's something that we can discuss. It doesn't happen particularly often. A lot of questions people ask me is, can you settle early? Absolutely. There's no fees to settle early. There's no real benefits to settling early either, because the whole point and the purpose of a finance lease is that it runs the course. So absolutely, you can settle early, and I probably asked it on a regular basis, but it's actually very rare customers do, purely because it's a great way of just keeping that cash. And once you start creating the cash and bringing the cash into the business, why would you want to then spend it when the whole purpose of doing the finance in the first place is to keep hold of it? And then obviously, we finance the whole solution from Trotec. So when you buy a machine, if you're buying a new machine, the likelihood is you've probably got a 2-year warranty in there with that, which obviously comes with the service from Trotec, and we will build the whole lot into the equation. So for the first 2 years, you shouldn't have anything else to pay outside of what we apart from if there's anything obviously goes wrong or in between that stuff with yourselves and directly with Trotec, but we try and build in the warranty, etc. So the whole thing's built in.
Good. It certainly is a smooth process, that's for sure. Okay,
Good.
so we've heard a bit about the CBILS stuff, and we actually did a webinar 2 or 3 weeks ago on CBILS, but it's still a big thing out in the money marketplace, isn't it? Or I nearly said money supermarket then. Can't do that. So tell us about CBILS and what that's all about.
Yeah, so obviously, like Brian says, we did a webinar about this, I think 3 weeks ago, because it's an important product that we wanted to bring to light to all customers that are looking at a Trotec machine. And the reason we've kept it at the top, we will talk about the other stuff underneath, but the reason I want to kind of highlight the CBILS stuff is that right now, obviously, with it's tough. We're in lockdown across the nation. There's lots of businesses that are either closed or struggling or working remotely. And the CBILS products offer you as the business the best terms. There are terms up to 6 years, whereas on standard terms, it's kind of limited at 5. They're the best rates on the market right now. There's lots of benefits, which we'll go on to in a minute. And, we don't want to shy away from it. This is the best product on the market. And for all of your, all of Trotec's customers, we want to ensure that the best products are being sold to enable them to grow their businesses. Likewise, if CBILS doesn't fit you as a business, we still have our other products, which are a finance, lease, hire purchase, and refinance.
So let's have a few details on the CBILS then.
Yeah, so the basic CBILS is it's coronavirus business interruption loan scheme. So it was put in by the government back in kind of April time. Initially, mainly as just a loan scheme, but you will find that lots of customers have gone to banks and secured loans against for this. Generally, I've seen that the maximum loans are kind of getting is about 250,000, and then customers are coming to us for other things. The advantage of it is that you can have multiple CBILS facilities. So the CBILS is a scheme backed by the government. The government support the lender up to 80% of the lend, which has enabled lenders to be kind of lend slightly differently compared to when it's their own kind of way. And the government pay the interest for the first 12 months. So there's obviously, as I've said, there's a range of products available. There's loans, leases, hire purchase, refinancing. Everything that was there is still there, and there's now the CBILS opportunity. So it ranges. It's asset finance. Product starts at 5,000, goes all the way up to 5 million, and the loans start from 50,000. So for a number of the speedy range that Trotec offer, that comes in under the 50,000 mark, which is why the asset finance is so key to this. And the way that we work out CBILS is it's 25% of your turnover. So I know I've spoken to companies who may have taken, let's say their turnover is £1 million. they've already taken maybe £100,000 of a loan, and they don't realise that they can do more. Actually, we can get to 250,000. So you could have a £100,000 loan and £150,000 worth of assets.
Interesting. So the benefits for this over a standard product.
Yeah, so the key benefits and features of it is, like I said, the government pays the first 12 months interest, which I think is, on a standard lease, you're probably talking about, I don't know, maybe ranging from 4 to 8%. So obviously that's a significant amount of money that the government is providing. As I said earlier, it's the lowest rates on the market right now. From a 3-year deal, you're looking at something like 1.8%. Even going on to a 5-year deal, you're maybe not looking past 3%. And obviously, the higher the amount of borrowed, the better the rate to some description. However, we can secure that 1.8% on deals from about £15,000 to £20,000. So there are different ways banks do it. Every bank has applied to the British Bank and given them the way that they would like to run. Some of them do it where you pay capital only. So the first 12 months, capital only, government pays the interest. And then there's other banks that are offering it where the first 12 months you pay nothing. So the interest is paid by the government, and you pay nothing until, now 2022. 2022. So in effect, you can invest now, as it says there, invest now and not pay anything for 12 months. And then the capital and the 4 years or 3 years, whatever interest is left, is spread over the remaining term. Unlike a normal asset finance lease, whereas a guarantee may be required on a bit of kit because the asset lend is higher than a percentage of the company net worth. The difference with the CBILS is it doesn't work on the net worth of the company; it works on the turnover of the company. So I mean, it's allowing customers to, like I say, go up to kind of 250,000 without any form of security being required. And as I said earlier, the term it goes up to 6 years, and there's the approval rate is longer. It can last up to 6 months. So you might not be looking to invest in this right now, but you might be looking to invest in it in May, June, July. We can get an approval in February, March, or that will give you that time until kind of September to get that machine in. As I said earlier, it's all about 25% of annual turnover. Currently, the deadline for this is the 31st of March 2021. The government's already moved it twice. It was November, then it was January, and now it's March. I do know that there is a product that will replace it if this doesn't get extended. We haven't been given full details of that yet, but we do know there'll be something else coming out. So it's not the end of this type of product. And as I say, if you're looking at buying something 6 months' time, why not look to get it in now, and then we can look to go from there.
So, Ben, we've had a question from Mark who says, sorry if this is a stupid question. No such thing as a stupid question, Mark. No. We will answer anything. Oh, that sounded like a challenge to people watching then, didn't it? Have you got to have been a trading business? Or if you've only just started up, are you able to apply for a CBILS? Or do you have to have got turnover for a certain amount of time?
Yeah, you've got there ahead of it. No. So you have to have been trading prior to December 19. I believe it's December 19. It may be March. I'm not 100% sure, but you have to have been trading before the start of the coronavirus pandemic in the country. I think the banks are working off December 19. So if you started an open shop in the summer of 2019, then yes. But if you open the business 6 months ago, then no, unfortunately, it doesn't apply.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, and here we are. Next slide was going to answer the question anyway, but you got there first, Mark.
Yeah, so the way the banks are looking at it is, have you been affected? I haven't spoken to a single business that hasn't been affected. I think every business has been affected in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't discriminate against those that were affected but have found ways to make opportunities. It's actually a positive thing. I work with lots of companies who may work in the events world and have found ways to obviously there's no events happened in the last year, but they found other resources and other ways to keep money coming into the business. This is a perfect example of that. So have you been affected? Yes. Have you found a way out, or have you found a way around it? Yes. It's still a tick on both. The key thing really is businesses need to have been trading, like I said, from about 2 years onwards, 18 months to 2 years. The reason is we have to look at annual turnover. And if you didn't have an annual turnover before COVID, it's very difficult to get a gauge on what turnover was. So it says there that on the last set of filed accounts, so we say as of December 19, was your turnover over 200,000? If yes, then you can apply for a CBILS product. It's only valid for limited companies. I know there's other things out there for sole traders and partnerships. And then the big kind of question, which right now is the kind of stopping point for people, is did you take the bounce back loan? I know. I think every business I've spoken to in the last 6 months took it. No one really knew what was going to happen on the 23rd of March when we went into lockdown. So people panicked. They took it. I know lots of people that have still got it in their banks. And the bounce back loan is a facility that stops at 50,000. So if your annual turnover is less than 200,000, then the bounce back loan would be the best option right now for you on the market. So you can get up to 50,000, whereas with the CBILS product, you can get up to 25% of turnover, which is sort of why they start from loans start from 50,000, and the bounce back is up to 50,000, 200,000, 25%, 50k. So yes, I've got companies that have taken a bounce back loan, they've not used it because what you have to do is you have to pay this back. You can't have both at the same time. But if you are looking to invest in the next 12 months of more than £50,000 and it's worthwhile, then it's worth looking at. Equally, is your business doing 50% of its turnover from UK business? This is obviously a business, and this is a UK product for UK businesses to support the UK economy. And then is your turnover less than 45 million? I've only had one customer that I've spoken to in the last 8 months or 6 months that had a turnover greater, and there is a product available for people on that thing, but it's not through us. And then there's the big question from like Mark was saying, was the business in difficulty in 2019? So if your business was in difficulty before COVID, this isn't a way of saving the business, which is why banks like to look back and look at the history. This is about, has your business been affected by COVID, not as a product that will save you if you were already in trouble before then. Okay,
perfect. So just to give us a couple of examples then, Ben. So we've got a couple of examples on screen. Just talk us through what's going on with these two examples.
Yeah, so I wanted to give, when we did the webinar before, I looked at, I was saying some rates and wasn't really backing it up with examples. So I wanted to kind of back myself here. So option one is hire purchase only. So the funder that I've used here is who kind of offers us the best rates from 15,000. All their products are on a hire purchase. So the first 12 months is capital only payments. So I've used an example of £35,000 over 3 years. So your first 12 month payments are £900.20. Then the following goes up to £1,089.20. You'll see the total payable is 36,900. It's only £1,900 over the 3 years. And then I've given you the average monthly rental so that you can work it out over the full 36. And then the equivalent flat rate is 1.85. See, 1.85 is, I've never seen, in the 6 years I've worked in this job, 1.85 has not existed. And equally, even on the other side, which is another funder which offers both lease and hire purchase, and the first 12 months you pay nothing. You may pay, if you do a hire purchase, you're going to pay the VAT, but apart from that, you'll pay nothing. You'll then see that this is over 5 years, so you've got 48 months of 847, slightly higher interest rate. Obviously, you get the benefit that you don't pay anything for the first 12 months, but equally, for £35,000 worth of kit, 3.2% is better than you'd have got probably pre-COVID anyway. So we'll come on to some other examples which will show this kind of stuff.
Good. Cheap cash.
Yeah,
Really cheap cash.
always nice. So
Sorry, Ben. If any more questions come up, please ask them in the chat. And we will be looking at non-CBILS because I know not everybody qualifies. There'll be some non-CBILS stuff at the end, isn't there, Ben?
Yeah. So I wanted to give some comparisons. So me and Brian looked at when we did the last one. We wanted to. This is the first of 3 examples of where we compare a CBILS finance, the current CBILS, to a standard lease, so you get an idea. The way I've worked is we've got a small business, then I go to a kind of an SME, and then I go to a kind of more corporate, bigger company, and we'll compare the two. So small business trading for 2 years, looking to purchase £15,000. From our end, we do a lot of our due diligence early on. We use Experian, probably the biggest data analyst kind of product in the market. So let's say the credit score of this customer is 40 out of 100. There'll be an average risk on Experian. Their turnover is £150,000. We know that doesn't work for CBILS. They were loss making in year 1. That's probably one of the most common things I see in a new business. Making a small profit in year 2. It's a lifestyle business, net worth of £6,000. What I mean by lifestyle business is kind of a business that you're running, maybe husband and wife, or is it on your own that you are. It's a business that effectively funds your lifestyle. It's not a big corporate company. I see a lot of them in the early days of the Trotec customers. Lots of people they start small, and as they get into the market, they grow and expand. So are they eligible for CBILS? No. However, are they available for any other asset finance? Absolutely. So we can look at a finance lease, we can look at a hire purchase.
So Ben, just tell us what the difference is for anybody that's not sure between finance lease or hire purchase.
So a finance lease is probably the most common product we use. It is effectively a lease rental. As people would know, as if everyone does car leasing, you'll probably know it as a lease rental. So you effectively rent the machine off the bank. So the bank rent it to you. Now, we, as a broker, have trading agreements which allow us to then sell that on to the customer at the end. And we obviously have an agreement with Trotec that we sell it on for another month's rental. So that is a finance lease. There's no upfront costs. It's literally just a monthly cost plus, the figure plus VAT, and it rolls. If it's a 3-year deal, you get to 36 months. We offer you another month's rental. You say yes, you want to buy it. So effectively, for 37 months worth of payments, the bit of kit's yours. Hire purchase is more used on bigger bits of kit or companies that have got good cash flow, who do a lot of finance or don't want to use that cash flow. The reason they've got cash and they don't want to get rid of it. And also, it's all about balance sheet and off balance sheet lend. So I forgot to say, so a finance lease is an off balance sheet lend. So you will not put that through on your accounts on the balance sheet, but I'm not going to get too technical on that. Whereas a hire purchase, you pay the VAT up front. So effectively you are owning it from the start. It will go on your balance sheet as an asset. And at the end of the term, there is just a small transfer fee, which ranges from about £50 to £150 plus VAT, roughly. That's the kind of difference. So, a luxury about, this sort of stuff is our deposits required very, very rarely. Obviously, you're welcome to. If you want to bring the price down, it will obviously help, but you don't need to pay anything up front. It normally just starts with 1 month rental, which normally activates 14 days after the equipment is delivered. So you pay nothing before you have it delivered, installed. You've got to make sure you're happy with it. If there's any problems, Trotec assists, and then we get it paid out. In this situation, director's guarantees are more than likely to be needed. They are if it's a £6,000. The way we work it is looking at your company net worth, and you can effectively lend up to about 30-40% of that before any other added security, which is why I then, if you were looking at this on a CBILS, which we'll look at in a minute, it's based on turnover, so you can get substantially more. So I've just given you some roughly idea figures here. 3 years is 510, 5 years 340. Interest rates for this is from about 7%. flat over the term. So as we move on to the next
So,
one.
am I right? Just right in thinking that that these numbers may vary a little bit depending on the actual state of whatever business it is you're looking at.
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's down a little bit down to risk from the
Massively,
bank.
which is why a lot of questions I get is, what's the interest rate? Is the first question. How long is a piece of string? Is probably the answer. It's all done on credit. It's all done on risk. So that, you know, the stronger the looking the company, the cheaper the money. Cool.
Okay.
So we look at an SME. So I've got many Trotec customers that I've worked with for the last 5 years who are now probably in this position. Trading 5 years, looking to purchase 45 grand bit of kit. So credit profile, they score 65 out of 100. They would show as a low risk. Their turnover is 500,000. Positive trends, so they've got positive net worth. They won't be making losses. They've got positive working capital. They might have cash in the bank. I've said it all there. And the net worth, let's say, is 50,000. So let's compare the two. Are they eligible for CBILS? Yes. Are they eligible for asset finance? Of course. They're available hire purchase and finance lease. Deposit required? None to both. Director's guarantees. This is the big one. So for a CBILS product, no. But for an asset finance, yes. So obviously, you know, 45 grand into 50 grand is about 90% of the lend, whereas on it's looking at the turnover on the CBILS. So that's the advantage of going down this route. And then obviously you can see the comparison on the pricing. It's about £70 a month cheaper. And then you can see on the interest rates, you know, we're looking at 2.5% compared to about 4.3. So there is, the benefits are on the right hand side are quite key. It's lower interest rates. First 12 months is interest free. I've actually done this as the first 12 months is the option of no payments. And of course, there's no guarantees required.
Okay. Next example.
Yeah, the big one. So, well-established company, trading over 10 years, looking to purchase a big bit of kit. The credit profile on these guys, 95 out of 100, nothing really wrong. Turnover of £1 million, positive trends. I just want to highlight that you might have a turnover of £1 million. If you've got negative trends and negative working capital, this doesn't mean you're going to get the best stuff. It's all on the credit. So we're looking at positive stuff here. So they're profitable, net worth of 650,000. So can you know, are they eligible for CBILS and asset finance? Absolutely. Same again, both finance lease and hire purchase. Same again, no guarantees required. Now, obviously here, our director's guarantees required. No. You know, so £1 million, you could probably, you know, we can get at least 250,000 of CBILS products for you. And we're probably looking at getting maybe 350,000, 400,000 done without any kind of security on a normal asset lend. This is where the best rates come into play. So as you can see on the CBILS products, we're looking at 1.8%, whereas on an asset lend, we're looking at kind of 3.2. And it's you know, a normal asset purchase, you know, rates below 3% are few and far between. Whereas obviously in the CBILS, 1.8% for 3 years. I mean, that's an absolute steal. It's a no-brainer for me.
Okay. Next one.
So I just wanted to finish talking about refinance, because there are, you know, the more we talk to customers and engage with customers about these products, the big question is, you know, did you buy 3 months ago, or, you know, some of them are even up to 6 months ago, and now thinking actually it would be better to have the cash back in the bank. Equally, you might have had to buy because you needed something quickly and you didn't have time to go through the process. We understand. But, you know, anything that you've purchased for the business within the last 3 months to 6 months, you can look to get back in the bank. You know, that cash is key. So, you know, we can put that on a finance agreement. It's called a sale and lease back, or a sale and hire purchase back. And you can get that cash back in the business. You know, we can do all sorts of things. So this is where we're talking about flexibility. There are lots of ways of doing things on both these products, which is flexible for everyone to do. So yeah, I think that's probably about it. If anyone's got any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Let's just stop sharing that and put us up next to each other. Any questions from the floor at all? Please pop them in the chat. Really appreciate your time today, Ben. I think it's an important thing. We find sometimes people come along, they say, oh, I don't use finance. Anything I want, I just pay for it myself. But that's not always necessarily the best way, especially when cash is tight. You can be prolonging your own ability to start making money at a much faster point in the year.
Yeah, I think it's quite a common question that we get. I get people tell me I only spend cash. Do you pay cash for your house? Do you have a phone bill? Do you have a mobile phone? Do you have car on finance? There's lots of things that people use finance for that they're worried about for their business. And I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's something like 70% of UK assets, bought assets in the UK a couple of years ago, was on some form of finance lend.
Really?
It's very common. And lots of people say to us, it's the companies that can't afford it that do the finance. I'd actually argue the difference. It's actually the companies that can afford it that are doing the finance. And the companies that can afford it know how important it is to keep cash in the bank. They're the customers that use it, because why would you not spread the cost? You can buy something now and effectively pay for a third of it in year one, or even less than that, or 20% of it in year one, when you can start making money. And if we can take advantage of the CBILS products, I'm doing a few deals at the moment where customers are telling me that they're almost going to make the money back on the machine in the first 12 months when they've paid nothing. And you could effectively clear that, depending on which product we use. There are ways around that. Equally, you could do a 12-month agreement and effectively pay. I looked at one for actually a Trotec customer. I think it was about 25,000, looking at it over 12 months. So they literally just deferred the payment for 12 months. Month 13, I think they paid back £200 of interest. So it cost them an extra £200 for another years of waiting for it. So
yeah, that's a phenomenal deal, and that's the whole point. That's why we wanted to run this session. I know it's not as whizzy with lasers going backwards and forwards, but it's an important part for our customers to know that we have the backup of Ben and his huge knowledge and his colleagues at Bluestar Leasing. And the key is just the same as when you're looking at a laser machine, there's lots and lots of different options, and we like to talk you through the process and work out what's right for you. It's exactly the same with finance products. There are lots and lots of options. Ben's a great fellow, which is why we continue to pass leads over to him, and he looks after our customers. And we see highlights of adverts and things like that with people seemingly offering ridiculously cheap money, but there's always that rate there plugged out of nowhere, which may be available to 0.5% of the people that actually want to apply for it. When you get into it and you start to understand it and you start to talk about how your business is, that rate generally doesn't apply to anybody. And I think we've seen that on many occasions, Ben, haven't we?
Yeah, it's all the time. Customers tell me they've got a better quote, and quite often I will happily eat my words if it's true. And I'll say, well, crack on and go with them. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, I get a phone call to say actually that they couldn't honour that rate. That's not the way we work. We want to build relationships with our customers. We're not looking for a one-off deal. We'll take one if that's the way it is. But we want to build a rapport, build a relationship with our customers, and we want to be honest with them. And Mark said earlier, was it a silly question? There are no silly questions. But just ring us, talk to us. We'll help you. We'll find solutions. If we can't help you, we'll try and help you another way. And like I said earlier, I've spoken to customers who are not eligible for the CBILS products. We're not sure if we'd have got kind of where they wanted to get to on normal asset purchase without going through too much of a rigorous process. So I pushed them down the bounce back loan, and they've gone and got a bounce back loan and actually bought the machine. That's got no benefit to us or Bluestar, but what it does have the benefit is that hopefully when you look at your next machine and your business is 3 years old, you'll come back to us knowing that, you know, that's the way we worked back then. And that's key to us is customer service.
Bro, look, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And to be honest, Ben normally joins us at trade shows as well when we're doing proper trade shows. So this is nothing new for him. But really appreciate you coming on, and we'll bid our farewells because it's time to invite Alex Beckingham into the broadcast. So thanks once again, Ben. I will remove you from the broadcast. It's been a pleasure, and I'll speak to you soon.
Speak to you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, mate. Okay, let's bring Mr. Beckingham in.
Afternoon, how are you?
Good afternoon, Mr. Beckingham. So, for anybody that's never met Alex, I'm sure there's a few watching that haven't. Alex, sorry, Alex. I was doing it, then we got an you can, Mark, you can either email Ben direct, or you can come via us. It's entirely up to you. We'll put you together. Okay, so Alex is our applications manager, and his role within our business is basically making things work for the sales guys. I think that's in a nutshell, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, it's anything that's slightly out of the ordinary, or our existing customers where maybe you started off and you're looking to do more kind of production style work and you want to see if you can speed up the process or be more efficient. It's that kind of thing.
So whenever there's something that's a bit more complicated than normal, Alex is the man that gets sent in to make it work, essentially. So whether that's, like you said, process driven with software, Alex does a lot of the training and installations of our large format machines. So he's our go-to guy when we want something done, and he's going to keep you all fascinated this afternoon. I can already see the numbers. The numbers are bumping up as we get onto a more lasery sort of subject and away from finance. So Alex is going to talk you through his photographic engraving. We're going to call it a masterclass, I think, Alex. You happy with that?
See what results our customers get.
So he wants to fly solo on this, so I'm going to disappear. We just need to wait about another minute before we start, just to make sure that.
I was actually obviously watching the finance side, and it is interesting to see, the different ways to get into the leisure ownership, just how accessible it actually can be. It's definitely useful.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. I mean, the whole idea of this 3 days is to be as informative as possible. So we'll see. What have you got coming up for us, Alex? How have you structured this?
So we're going to be covering 6 real basically tips about photo engraving. So obviously there's a lot of different options out there, so it's hard to cover everything. It's really just to give a bit of a guide, and then hopefully from this you can do some experimentation, and then obviously get back in contact with us once you've maybe had a bit more of a chance to play with it.
And what substrates are you going to be covering? What you putting photos onto?
This is really, so with this guide, it's really trying to cover all material. So we're not actually going to be processing anything live in this, but we'll try and kind of set out 6 steps as to the best kind of work ethic in order to work with kind of any material and any photo. Okay.
Well, in that case, I think it now, according to me, it's 2:40, which means it's time for me to duck out and for you to take over. So good luck.
I'll switch a little bit.
Okay.
There we go. Well, thank you very much for joining. And as already mentioned, we're going to be having a little bit of a look at photo engraving. So if you're watching, then please obviously be interesting to know kind of what businesses you are working with and what you'd actually be looking to engrave in terms of the photos. So do ask questions away in the chat throughout this. And then at the end of this, we will be doing a question and answer session. But as already mentioned, the idea behind this is to hopefully give you a little bit more of a guide. So we couldn't really cover every material and the best way to do everything. So this is really to give you kind of maybe a structured approach to looking at working with photos. So to do that, we're going to be looking at 6 different tips in terms of your workflow. And then at the end, we'll be finishing off with the question answer. Hopefully this will be about 25 to 30 minutes with 10 minutes at the end for the question and answer. So let's have a quick look initially at some photos. So here we've got some examples of some photos that have been engraved. Obviously, what we're looking at here is some very different materials. So we've got things like glass, plastics, acrylics. You can also engrave onto wood. Really anything that you can laser onto normally, you can use for doing photo engraving, but there are some differences in the material. One thing that is worth noting when you look at these examples is actually that the backgrounds have been removed, especially from some of the images. And essentially that's going to allow you to have some better contrast. So also when you're looking at doing photo engraving yourself, have a look at what other people are doing as well. It's quite easy to search on the web and get an idea of, what kind of does work and what doesn't work. So let's start off by talking about your material settings for the actual process itself. It can be quite often thought of that you just, generally when we do our engraving setting, it's quite easy. We just engrave into the material, keep adding power until we get a nice contrast. But quite often what that can end up is we end up really engraving into the material. So by that, I mean, we're actually removing material, so creating depth into the material. And that's really great for doing things like your basic text. And it does give you a nice amount of contrast. But the problem with this is when we put lots of power into the laser engraving, say we're aiming the laser at little dots, so we just turn the laser on and off once. If you're using a lot of power, what you'll find is that is actually spreading. So hopefully you can see this kind of red block here. So that's to illustrate that we may be aiming just at this narrow portion here, but because you're using a high amount of power, the dot's spreading. So why is that important? Well, when we're engraving a photo, we're generally working with lots and lots of detailed information. And if each of these dots starts to expand because we're using too much power, all of these little dots start to overlap, and it means that you lose a lot of detail from your engraving. So how do you find the right setting? Well, really what you've got to do is just keep adding enough power that you're really getting some kind of color contrast, and really try to avoid going too deep into the material, because basically it's going to result in you having less definition from the image itself. And also, let me see if I make this a little bit bigger. Over here you can see in the top right-hand side where it says marking, you can see that I've added a little bit of black ink to the material. So some materials you can't always get a great contrast straight away, but there are often other workarounds to kind of bring that information and detail out of the actual material itself. So let's have a quick look at an example. So over here we can see two extremes. So on the left we quite clearly just haven't used enough power. So you can see that we haven't brought out the contrast in the material. And on the right hand side you can see where we've actually used too much power. So as you can see from this image on the right hand side, we're losing all of the kind of the contrast and the differences between the background and the foreground, just because we're using so much energy that all these little dots are overlapping and we're losing a lot of detail from the image itself. So hopefully that's given you an idea of your material settings. We're adding just enough power basically to get some contrast, add some material, but just don't go too high with it. Number 2 is going to seem like a bit of an obvious tip, but a bad picture does result in a bad engraving, and it's something you've really got to bear in mind, especially when you're working with customers' artwork. Quite often you'll find you'll get sent an image and it's just not of a high quality. Now that doesn't always mean that that's the end of that subject. So for example, if you've been emailed a photo or you've been sent a photo via a phone, quite often when the photo is sent to you, it might be compressed. So it might actually be that a high quality version of the photo does exist, but you do have to work with this process. And once you really get some experience with photo engraving, you will find that there are cases where quite simply you actually will just have to turn away work just because you can't get a good result from the image itself. So this really goes back to just real basic setup in terms of more on the photographic side. So for example, if you've been given an image with poor lighting, then of course we can't make data out of something that's not there. If the photo itself is out of focus, then again, we're not going to get the contrast. And again, if the exposure is wrong, we're again not going to be able to get a nice result. So it's very important to realize that obviously with our standard photos that we're working with, we have the color to provide that contrast and that really great look from a photograph. Whereas with a laser, typically, obviously, we're only having that light and the dark from the material. So basically, if you've got a bad photo, it's going to be even worse when you've actually engraved it with the laser. So the final thing, and we will have a little bit of a look at a guide for this as well, is the actual image size and the quality as well. So here we have this file here. Obviously, it's a vector file, but it gives an idea it's been converted to a JPEG. And you can see we have two previews of the same file, but at just different resolutions. So you can see at the very top, we have a nice high quality image. And what that means is that when the laser is zooming in onto the material itself, we can see that we have good contrast and good clarity, and that the laser can pick up all of the detail here. Whereas on the lower section, you can see where it's all pixelated. So what does that mean? It means when we actually print that through our laser driver, it's going to start interpreting all of this kind of pixely gray area as blurred data, and that is what it will engrave. So you have to be aware of what the image looks like, not only zoomed out, but also, when you actually expand it up to the size you're going to be working with. So let's have a quick look at some example resolutions and some example file sizes. And you can quite easily see here that when you work with a larger image, essentially it's quite simple, you're going to need a larger file. But with modern day smartphones and other cameras, generally, you can get a very high quality image straight from there. But you just need to make sure that you're not being sent the compressed version. So this is a little guide and a little idea of kind of the file sizes that you do require. So now we've had a look at the actual setup in terms of the material setting, and also having a look at how the kind of image quality can affect things or things to consider. We can now look at the actual patterns and the way we're actually converting that image data. So quite often there can be a little bit of confusion about how we're processing an image, especially depending on what lasers you have access to. Sometimes it's considered that we're processing the image as a grayscale, and that's not what we're doing. So with a grayscale, this example over here on the left-hand side, you can see that actually what we use this for is for a relief pattern. So what that means is where the image is darker, so where it's black, you engrave with more power, that creates depth, and where it's lighter, it uses less power. So this is a really great effect, but we use this for contouring. We don't use this for photos at all. So grayscaling isn't, well, that's a good way to preview an image, it's not how we're processing it. When we process an image, what we want to do is we want to convert it to a dot style matrix or pattern. So over here on the right hand side, I'll just see if I can make this a little bit bigger again to make it a bit easier to see. You can see that we have some different versions. So over here, what we have is just simply, we've converted the image to black and white data. So if you look at these two columns on the right hand side, you can understand a bit more what's happening. So where the image is darker, so at the top, you can see it's having bigger dots and they're more densely grouped. And then at the bottom, these dots start to widen out and the dots become smaller. So this is how we need to convert the image. And if you've got a Trotec laser, we actually have a built-in function into our printer driver. If you don't have a Trotec laser, then you can manually do this as well with a lot of different bits of software, and we will have a look at doing that as well manually. But hopefully this gives you an idea that we're not actually converting it to grayscale, we're actually converting it to a dot style pattern. And going back to the material setting, the other reason this is important is obviously we've already chosen at the very start of this our laser power, where when the laser hits the material, it results in color change. So we don't want the grayscale where the power is varying up and down and giving us different results throughout. So let's have a quick look at setting up a file. And if you do visit our YouTube channel, I do actually have an example on there as well. You can just search Trotec photo engraving, I'm sure it will come up. And on there, you'll be able to see some of the different results. But right now, let's bring up an example of working with an image. So over here, we have the original image on the top left-hand side. And over here, we have kind of what would be the finished article. So guessing the image just comes state here. And then also I'm going to also show you how to do this manually as well. So over here, we have an example of manually converting this pattern, which hopefully will give you a bit more of an insight as to what we're doing when we're setting up the drawing. So let's just do a quick comparison. So if we have a look at the main photo, the first thing we can hopefully see is that at the edges of the image, it's actually out of focus and blurred. So that's the sort of data that you might want to crop out at the very end of it. But what we're really trying to do here is we're trying to get rid of some of the shadows. So you can see it's quite dark here on the inside of the jacket. And then also what we want to try and do is to improve the contrast. So you can see here on the hat, although we do have some good color contrast between these different layers of the hat, if we look at the final example, you can see how much more emphasized we've been able to make this difference between the highs and the lows. So let's have a quick look at how to do this. Obviously, I'm using Corel Draw for this example, but all of these functions are available in lots of different software. And especially when you look at things like Photoshop, there's going to be a huge amount more of control and things that you can do. So this software is really kind of like the more of the limited side of it. So I'm just going to copy this image so we can start with the original. And the first thing we want to do is we're just going to have a look at some basic adjustments. So here we're going to be looking at the contrast again. So we'll just bring that across, and then we can bring that here. So what we want to do is we want to have a look at these little sliders. So let me just reset this. So this is the image data here, and these are the darks and the shadows. And up here are the highlights of the image up here. And down here we have the ability to remove some of the shadows by compressing the image. And basically what it will do is it will get rid of the data when we move the slider up. So you can see if I bring this up, it's removing more and more of those darker tones. And conversely, if we were at the top here and we bring this down, you can see it's removing more and more of the highlights. So this is a very small and quick and simple change, but what it means is, although it's going to make the image look a little bit washed out, we can start to lighten up some of these dark areas. Now, one thing to bear in mind when you do these basic adjustments is obviously we're not actually going to be printing this image. So what you actually end up with for lasering, you may not look great for a printed image, but should work quite well for working with the laser. And over here, you can see the sky is actually not too bright, but you can see we've got some highlights here. And again, if this was, say, overexposed slightly, you can just get rid of some of the upper edges here, and you can just reduce some of the overexposure, also get rid of some of the shadows. But again, if you're working with something like Photoshop, you can go into this in a lot more detail and actually come into certain parts of the image to adjust it. But you can still get quite a good result with just these basic adjustments. Next, we want to come up into our adjustments and our effects, and you're looking for an effect called an unsharp mask. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to look at the highs and lows, so a bright color and a dark color, and it's going to enhance that. And so if we again get rid of the preview and we zoom in here, and you can just see, if I enable this again, you can see what's happening here. So we're really bringing out the contrast between the different colors. And again, this wouldn't look great as a printed photo, but it would allow us the laser driver to pick it up and give us a better engraving. So let's have a quick look at the controls. So the percentage is how much we are applying the effect. So whether we're applying it a lot, so we're to the image, or only a little bit. Next, we have the radius. So if you imagine that we're using a paintbrush, if we have this at a small number, so it's a low number like the 1, then it's like using a fine liner pen, whereas up here would be like a big permanent marker. So basically, it's going to emphasize the contrast even further. And then the threshold is what kind of difference in the image does it need to see to activate it. So if you have this too high, it's going to ignore a lot of the image. But as we start to bring this down, you can see it starts to pick up a lot more of the image. So let's just have a quick look, and you can see even across the sort of details in the face as well, you can see how it's really emphasizing the contrast between the highs and the lows. And all of this is just going to help the laser when we actually send the file across. So from this point, if you've got your Trotec laser, then all you need to do is to go to File, and then we'll go down to Print. And we'll just print the selection. And then in here, we can see we have the different setup. So down here is really what we're interested in. So obviously you choose your material, but here we're going to choose the mode, and here you can see we have photo optimized. You can then set your resolution, which we'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute, but generally you're going to be around the 500 mark. And then here we have the different ways it's going to interpret the data. So this really takes a bit of experimenting, but I would recommend you try something like the Stucky filter, or all of them are fairly good to be honest, but it's just some slight differences. So from this point, we can then simply click print, and then it's going to create the file and send it across to the job control. So just bear with me a second while job control is opening up, and then I'll share that across. So let's bring this across into here, and then we're going to want to just quickly find the file, 1 second. There we go. So when we look at the next step, which we're going to look at, which will be manually converting the actual file itself, the main thing that's important to bear in mind for manually converting the file is actually looking at how many lines per inch that we're using with the actual file itself. So here we can see the file, and the Trotec driver is automatically converting it to black and white, and it's very hard to see just on the preview side, but you can see it's converting it to black and white data and dots. And you can see by bringing out the enhancements and using the unsharp mask, it's really emphasized the detail, which then is picked up by the laser as well. So from that point, you simply just run the file, and you've got something you can work with. So let's just take a quick little look at how we can manually do this as well. So here we have the image, and we're just going to come up into here, and we're just going to go to bitmaps, into mode, and we're going to turn it into black and white. So that's again going back to the fact that what we want to create is a black and white data for the laser. So the laser is either engraving or it's not. So here you can see it's set up at the moment, and essentially what we're doing to the images, we're converting it to these black and white dots. You can have a little play here with the different shapes that you use for your laser. Generally I just use the round function. Here you can change the angle. Again, you can just really use this if you have something where you've got some banding to the actual image itself. But the main thing that's interesting and worth experimenting with here is the actual lines per inch. So if you're working with a material where you're able to pick up a lot of detail, then you can obviously have this at a higher number, so say maybe around 300. But what I often find is, especially when you're working with material that's harder to engrave, then I would recommend that you really look at using a lower resolution. So if you think each of these dots, trying to create 300 dots per inch, that's probably 0.2 of a millimeter, something like that. Whereas you really actually want to be down at a resolution, probably around 75 lines per inch or something like that when you're working with wood, just because we need these bigger dots in order to actually see the contrast in the wood. So I hope that makes sense. Just because the wood's less sensitive, you need to use a bigger dot size in order to see that contrasting mark. So it's very easy to try, engrave at 1,000 lines per inch, set the actual image conversion again right up at a really high number, 500 to 1,000. But actually, because you've got those dots all so close together, you actually won't see a lot of the detail from the image itself. And again, these previews aren't ever really a great way of visualizing the final result that you're going to get. You really need to run the job on the machine and on the laser to see exactly what you're getting. So I'm just going to quickly bring back up the presentation, and then I'll just have a quick look at some of the questions. But hopefully that's giving you an idea of how you can work and get images across. So again, if you've got the Trotec, then I generally do leave the image in color and just use the built-in method. But otherwise, you can manually play with it as well if you start to get more used to it. So I've just seen we've got a question from Nathan, and does the job controller software work reliably on a Mac? So with the job control, it doesn't install natively onto a Mac. What you'll need to use, and we actually will have something on this later, is our new Ruby platform. So you'll still have a Windows-based kind of slave computer that will be connected to the machine, but our new Ruby software will allow you to work direct with the machine. That also has image functions built into it, and you can actually remotely get files sent across and set up on the machine. So it is possible to work with a Mac. Let's have a quick look at the other questions. And I think we're good to continue. So again, if you do have any other questions, do ask away. And now we will continue on with the presentation. So the next thing you need to consider with the setup of your machine is the actual material itself. So you can kind of range this quite easily from easy to work with and then to material that's more difficult to work with. So on the left-hand side here, we have material that's really great to work with. So our Trolleys metallics, or our just general Trolleys material. For those of you who aren't aware, that's an engraving laminate. So we have a very thin layer top coating, and then beneath that we have a very contrasting color. So in this case, it would be a silver onto a black in this example. And what that means is each of those dots that's fired by the laser reveals the black data or the black color below, and you get a really nice detailed image. The same also goes for anodized aluminium, which just works very nicely with the laser. So again, when you fire into anodized aluminium, the beam doesn't really spread at all, and that means that you get a nice, very crisp and clean engraving. So what you need to consider is if you're doing quite small engraving or you're doing very detailed images, especially things like photographs, then working with this type of material is going to give you a much better result than working with something like wood, where every time we fire into the material, the energy starts to spread and we just really can't get as much detail. It doesn't mean you can't get really good results from engraving into wood. You know, it's a very popular material to work with, but it is worth bearing in mind that when you create your products, you do experiment with different materials to see the different results that you can get. And in the middle, we've got things that are painted or are standard acrylics. And again, it's going to depend on the color. So obviously, if you're working with something like a clear acrylic, then you're going to be wanting to have something that actually maybe will be lighter edge. So I've got, you can see here, this is an example of something I've engraved into some clear acrylic, and it looks really nice, especially if you have it up by a window or something like that. But in order to make this look even better, you know, this is actually designed to work with an edge lighting panel. So this is where you put an LED to the edge here, and it will bring out all of the image on there as well. So it's worth bearing that in mind. And hand in hand with that is considering the actual size of the engraving. So if you're working with a very small product, then you're going to want to use a material generally that's going to be more sensitive. So things like the Trolleys or the anodized aluminium. If you're working with a very large product, then again, that's where you can consider working more with materials like woods, because it's that much easier, because you've got that much bigger of an area that you're working with. You can then use that lower, so the bigger dots, and still get a really good result onto that. And the final thing to consider is also to look at experimentation as well. So over here, we've got some examples of different ways that you can process and work with the materials. So on the left-hand side here, we've just taken the image, engraved it into material. Again, I'd say I probably actually want to run this in a slightly lower resolution, but by using a paint fill or an ink fill, we're able to bring out the contrast into the material. This is also a very good technique to use if you're working with a material like wood. You could actually apply a lacquer to the material before you actually engrave into it. Then that way you'll just remove the lacquer and obviously the little dots in the material. And that way, when you take your rub and buff, it's not going to stick into the rest of the sheet of the material, and it's just going to stick into the areas that are exposed. I've also used this technique as well. Unfortunately, I've got an image here, but we're working with materials like marble, and you can almost do the it's very popular, like the kind of a paint by numbers type thing. So obviously, in this case, I'm just adding one color. In this case, it's black. But if you have a large enough image, you can actually start to add back color into an engraved image. So you can pick up different parts of the image and start to add the different colors. Unfortunately, I haven't got the artistic ability to be able to pull something like that off, but I have seen people do it, and it does come out really, really nicely. And again, here we can see that we have the same image again, and you can see we can start to pick up a bit more detail by enhancing the contrast. And finally, on the right hand side over here, we have the coating that we've applied to the top of the material. And what that has done is, again, we're engraving through the paint to reveal the wood underneath, and it creates a really good effect. So I think that's something that really you have to bear in mind when you create these kind of products, especially with photos. It's very easy just to get excited when you first get a laser and have you create a file, you send it to the machine, you hit go, and you just don't get that good of a result. But actually, by taking a bit more time to experiment with different finishes, the different materials, it does take quite a lot of time to do. But once you start to get used to it, then it's something that you can normally perform and do quite reliably as well. So the final thing we're going to cover is, if photo engraving is something that you really are looking to do and you really want to incorporate into your business, is you really do need to make sure that you take very much, as much setup time as possible. So we'll just talk a few little points here. So the first thing is that your material has to be in focus. You can get away with, if you're doing block text and other type of engraving, with having a material that's not perfectly flat. But this over here is just a little example. So you've got the laser beam across here that's coming down to your focus point, and if your material is not flat, say it's coming up to this point here, again, you've got a really wide laser beam length you're out of focus, and you're going to lose all of that detail. So it's not going to be a good result, no matter even if you've got a great setup on the picture and everything else. The same goes for the material being flat, so anything that's warped. So if you're working with woods, then particularly you need to take care with how you store your material before you engrave into it. Or maybe you want to actually, if you're just engraving it, bond it to something like an aluminium plaque or one of our engraving tables so it doesn't warp at all. And then the next thing to consider is the actual lens. So especially if you have a flex laser, then you might be using a 2.85-inch lens, and that's going to have relatively quite a big dot size compared to something like the 1.5-inch lens, which I would recommend for your photo engraving. So again, you can think of it like the difference between using a fine liner and a paintbrush. So if you've got these nice small lens, you've got a nice small dot, and you can get a lot more detail from an image. Whereas if you've got a much bigger dot from using something like a flex lens, then you're not going to be able to get as much of a good result. Finally, make sure your extraction is set correctly. So what you want is, you want to make sure that when you're engraving into the material, that all of the surface of the material is still clear. So this generally comes if you're using too much power, but quite often I've seen it where you have too much power into the material, you get a lot of dust and debris and dirt sticking to the top of the material, and then the laser's having to engrave through that in order to get the contrasting mark. So you can imagine, obviously, that's effectively going to be like having slightly less power if the material is really dirty on top. So you do want to make sure you have the extraction focused. And the simple way to do that is basically blank off the rest of the bed and make sure the extraction is focused just around that engraving area. And the final thing to consider is, do you need to run at maximum speed? So this really especially applies to anyone who has glass laser technology. So if you have a glass laser, they tend to be kind of 20 to 30 times slower at firing than an RF ceramic core laser. And what that means is, when the laser head is flying across the top of the material and you're asking it to fire all of these little pixels and bits of data, the laser just can't turn on and off fast enough. It then starts to skip dots, it then starts to have too much power from the laser shot before, and then it will put in too much power in the next dot. Basically, it just results in a really bad engraving. So you will actually find there is performance benefit with photo engraving by slowing the machine down. So if I'm doing basic text, then especially with ceramic or laser, I tend to be running that at its maximum speed. It's very easy to engrave. But if you're doing things like your photos, it actually is worth experimenting. Just try halving your normal engraving power and your engraving speed, then try quartering it. Obviously, it's going to take a lot longer to create the actual artwork and the graphic. So obviously you have to account for that in terms of your pricing, but you can actually find you can get better results by slowing the machine down, giving the laser tube more time to fire, because we're trying to fire at little dots of pixel data, and you just really need to give the machine as much time and to do it. But obviously that's going to increase the cost of the products. But hopefully that's given you all an idea of the kind of workflow that you're going to use. So a quick summary is, first of all, make sure you're not using too much power. So just mark the material, don't engrave too deeply into it. Number two is to use a suitable image. And actually coming back to using a suitable image, if you do find a really good photo, so you create a really good engraving with a photo, make sure that you keep that photo, because then you can use it on different materials and then start to play with different settings and different parameters. And in that way, you can be sure that the bad result you're getting isn't actually down to the material and it's down to the image. So you want that nice steady base image to be able to work from. And again, anyone who's searching, you can also use HDR filters. If you have a look at that as well, that's a good way to improve your images as well. Next, we're making sure to use a raster pattern. So again, if you've got a Trotec laser, you've got that built in through either job control or through Ruby. You've got that built in with your software. Again, obviously, I've shown you a little brief introduction of how you can manually do that by converting it to black and white data. Next, you need to make sure that the material you're working with does provide that contrast in the first place. And then, of course, making sure that that goes hand in hand with the size of the engraving. So trying to do very small engraving into wood isn't going to give you a great result. And then finally, just make sure that you take the time to set up your machine correctly. So focusing on using the smallest lens that you have available, checking it's all in focus, the material's flat, and everything else. So hopefully that has been useful. Of course, you can follow us on social media, and there are obviously other tutorials on YouTube for this. And if you do have any questions, then please do ask away. So let's have a quick look across to some of the questions and we'll see what we have here. Let's have a look. So I can't see any questions at the moment. Don't be shy, feel free to ask away. If I can't answer it, I'll defer it to Brian when he comes back. Let's have a quick look. Does anyone have any questions at all? No, looks like we have nothing here. So I think Brian is going to pop himself back into the chat instead.
We had one question.
Oh, and he's still, I like it when Brian's muted. It's much easier on the ears.
Can you hear me now?
No, still can't hear you, Brian.
I shouldn't be muted.
I've just seen one question coming in about, does this work on Mac? So for working with a Mac, you're going to need to look at using our Ruby control software. So you'll still actually need physical access to a Windows-based computer. So that needs to be connected to the machine, but essentially it'll just be sat there. And then you can work straight from Ruby, and you can create all of your artwork, graphics, and then have that run on the machine. I've got a question about cutting for paper. Interestingly, this actually probably links to another topic, but it's really going to depend on the machine you've got. With our latest OptiMotion and our brand new 100, 300, and our 400, we can really cut very fast indeed. So should be holding other webinars on that topic, but I'm just trying to think of.
We will be
25% speed, so it must have always been up at about nearly over it, where it would have been over a meter a second on some of the cuts. You can get a really good result, and that's down to the ceramic core as well.
We'll be cutting some paper on the Speedy 400
Brian's
demo
still
tomorrow.
silent. I'm guessing he has no energy. If only this was optional. Need a switch like this one.
Oops.
We'll get rid
Hello,
of
everybody.
1 second. Let's swap across slightly.
There we go.
Can you hear me, James?
I can hear you perfect, Alex. 4-minute warning. We can hear Brian perfect as well.
Or maybe I can't hear anyone. Oh, it turns out it's my headphones that are broken. Well, at this point, you might as well just remove me from the stream then.
Good on you. Thanks, Alex. Top man.
Thank you, Alex.
Right, let's get him gone. We don't need him anymore if he can't hear anybody. Did we miss any questions? Nathan was asking about fastest speed you've been able to cut paper. We'll actually be covering that high-speed paper cutting with our Speedy 400 in the session tomorrow, where you'll see some paper being cut at very quick speeds. So tune in for that, Nathan. But in terms of whatever machine you've got, it'll be down to the maximum traversing speed of your machine. One other quick question from Daphne, Purpose and Worth. Have you had any success engraving leather? Yes, leather's a great product to work with. We've actually also recently launched our own leather product, which is available at engraving-supplies.co.uk.
Lots of nice colours and combos in there. Two-tone leather, very nice product.
But there's lots of leathers available, so we work with it a lot. Doesn't always give off the greatest aroma, but in terms of engraving, yeah, lovely product to work with. Right, I'm going to jump off again now because this was not mine. I was just trying to tell Alex that he couldn't hear anybody else. So I'm going to leave you in peace, James. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Enjoy the next session. This is one we're all really looking forward to. So no pressure on Hannah.
No, very special guest appearing very shortly. Thank you, Brian. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm about to add my co-host, Trevor Stevenson, and our very special guest for the day, Hannah Nunn, to the stream. Thank you, guys, and welcome.
Afternoon. Hi. Hello.
How's everybody doing? We ready?
Yeah, ready. All good. Can you hear me? Fine.
Yeah.
Yes, good.
Loud and clear. Now, what we're going to do is, guys, if you don't know how this session is going to be, it's all about Hannah's business. I'm going to find out how she got started, about her creative journey and what led her to her current laser processing. And that's what's going to happen. So if you've seen any of our Q&A sessions before last year, similar kind of format, we're going to ask Hannah some questions. We'll start with some general about the background. Then we'll kind of get a tour of a studio. We're going to see where the magic happens. And then we're going to go into the laser-related questions. And we're going to leave 10 minutes at the end for Q&A with you guys. So any questions for Hannah or Trev, put them in the chat and we'll get them when possible. If you do have any questions and you want to make sure they get answered, send them to inquiries@troteclaser.co.uk just in case we do miss any. Obviously, we've only got 40 minutes. So we want to get as many answered as possible. The key thing is, as well, this is being recorded. So if you do need to duck out, please make sure that, or just look out for the link that we'll send later on. And you'll be able to catch up then. Don't want to miss this session. It's going to be really cool. And the links for all of tomorrow's sessions are below. So should we get started, guys? I think it's the main one.
Yeah, let's go.
Excellent. I'm just going to share my screen because we're not going to do Death by PowerPoint, as Brian said this morning. What we're going to do is we're going to showcase Hannah's website and some of her nice social media products. So the first question I'm going to say, Hannah, is just how did you get started on your creative journey while my Chrome tab crashes? So when that loads, we'll get to that. But how did you start?
Well, it depends how far back you want to go, but I've always been a little bit on the creative side and encouraged in that way to play with ideas. And I went to art college when I was young, and have been making things ever since. So when I went to art college in Wales many years ago, and I stayed there for quite a lot of years. And that's when I got really interested in nature, in drawing plants and flowers. And but then I moved back up to Hebden Bridge about 21 or so years ago, when my kids were ready to start school, and that's when I had a little bit more free time and decided to start a little business. So originally I was just bringing all these ideas together that I'd been playing around with for years, and wanted to make this range of handmade cards. And I was doing very, very intricate hand cutting at that point, and had this really successful little range of greetings cards, and they were selling all over. They were selling had a really great agent. They were selling in Harrods and in Selfridges and in lots and lots of craft galleries up and down the country. And I was intricately cutting them by hand with my craft knife. Very lots of tiny little windows and tiny little shapes. And it was at that point I was like, oh my goodness, there's these things called laser cutters, and they'll do this for you. And wouldn't it be amazing if I could have one? But they were like, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds out of my reach at that point. So I carried on hand cutting for a while, and I was always holding up my silhouettes to the light, like to look through them. And one day, a colleague in my studio was like, you know, why don't you make lights? You know, you can't make much money per card, per handmade, hand cut card. And it was very true. But there might be something in this, in making lights. So I did have a vision of what these lights might look like, and kind of saw things flash before me, and set to work trying to design the first one. How was I going to make them structurally? How are they going to be held together? How was I going to illuminate them? So it was much trial and error. And at that point, I applied for some funding from the Arts Council, and they were supportive, and they gave me a what did they call it? Research and development grant. And I was able to play with ideas, and forever holding things up to the light, trying things on, and then the first lamp was born. And the rest is history.
I can say it's almost a bit of a light bulb moment, if you pardon the pun. It's very...
It was, James. Yes, it was. Has to be said.
Well, speaking of the light, Hannah, obviously at the moment, before the evening draws in, would you mind just swiveling your camera around just to show them the studio? Because obviously I can see it's quite light in the background. We're probably catching the early evening sun.
Yeah, well, there is no sun whatsoever. It's the early morning light, early evening light, yes. But good idea to do the tour now, because it is going to get dark. So I'm just going to turn my camera around, and I'll take you on a little tour. So as well as lighting, I also make a range of window films, and you can see them here. Again, all my work is about silhouette and light, and things coming to life with the light. So I've got quite a lot of window film on display. And as well as the window film and the lighting, I also make this range of what I call tiny treasures. So there are lots of like little special things that you might find, like chestnuts and tiny acorns. And
what type of materials are those?
These are made out of...
We talked about paper earlier.
These are card, so they're slightly thicker than the paper, so they're able to... But people think all the time that they email me and say, I'm really interested in your little wooden treasures. And they're not wood, they're card.
Still very delicate though, and very intricate.
Yeah, they are really delicate and really intricate. You can see them, the little sycamore seeds. They've got a lot of detail. The laser handles that detail really well, which is what I love about it. Because I
can see why I can see why people do think it's wood though, Hannah. They look very durable, even though, like you say, they're very delicate. They look
they're
very
more
well made.
delicate than they look. And so I've just got a couple of examples here of the paper being cut. So this is very, very fine. But the laser also does a good job of cutting out very, very fine detail. So I'll cut shapes and then I'll layer them on the paper, and then I take them over to this part of the studio and put them through my laser cut. That's not a laser cutter, that's a laminating machine. And then got my drawer full of bits. So these are all the poppers and clips and tools and things that I use to construct the lamp. So inside each of the cylinders is one of these little tripods, which fixes in with poppers and clips. I wanted to create the lights with as little shadow as possible in them to make them really, really simple. I've got a lamp over here, and it doesn't do that well on camera, but it changes its colour somewhat. But you can see the level of detail about these. And then down at the bottom, that's one of the little poppers. So you can see there's minimal shadow for the tripod inside to clip into the lamp. And I wanted to show you this bit of detail as well on this foxglove lamp. I don't know if you can see it very well, but this is me making use of the engrave on the laser machine. So the engrave, obviously takes away the top layer of paper and gives me another kind of colour in my palette to play with when I'm designing the lamps. And over here we have some we made earlier. So lots of lamps waiting to go to their new homes. And then here is the wonderful Speedy 300, which has, which has I'm really very happy with it. I'm doing lots of experimenting this week. Actually, I've been playing a lot with I'll show you these. We're trying to make textures with the engrave, so I've been cutting out pebbles, and I'm not sure if we'll be able to see these when the light shines through them. There's that's done with the engrave by making the paper really thin.
And again, obviously with Alex being on the session before, what a lot of time we're doing is with applications like this, where we've got some materials that are very delicate, sometimes very, very difficult to work with. This is where we brought Alex in, wasn't it? And Alex did a lot of the sampling and working with your designs to try to get the optimum results on very fragile, frail.
Absolutely.
Pieces.
Like the paper that I use is so thin, and it's hard to imagine that you could take a layer of it away and it would still hold together. But that's how fine the laser can go. And Alex was really helpful, because I wouldn't have known where to start with the powers and the speeds, and he helped and experimented with my particular materials and gave me some settings to try and work with. So that's been really helpful.
So how do you start then? Do you draw electronically, or are you starting off from kind of pencil sketches? How do you get obviously from the vision of seeing what you want to create and then getting it into the laser? Because it's the creative part that I always feel is the most difficult, and then being able to get that across and represent it and then kind of get it into the machine.
Well, sometimes, like with these pebbles that I've been playing with this week, I have just designed them in the computer. But normally I do like to draw, and I've got one of my sketchbooks out to show you. So I do make lots and lots of intricate black and white line drawings, because I'm thinking of, when I'm drawing, I'm thinking about taking a scan of these and turning them into a vector graphic. So I have to be really careful when I draw that all the lines join up and everything's just ready. So I'll do my drawings first, and then I scan them in. Got a big A3 scanner, and then I will turn them into That's a graphic. I use CorelDRAW. I also use Illustrator. I use Corel with the laser. So once I've got the drawing, then it can go anywhere. It's like, what is this going to be for? Sometimes I'm designing for wallpaper, sometimes I'm designing for window film, sometimes for lighting, but quite often these motifs will find themselves on all of these different products. So I've been making my lamps for 10 or so years before I launched my wallpaper range, and you can see that the wallpapers have got some of the same motifs that you'll find on my lamps. So I was experimenting with surface pattern design, and like, here's a drawing. I've got all these motifs ready that I've been making lamps out of for years. Let's play with these and see what happens. And they all became wallpapers. And then more recently than that, then this window film product showed itself up how perfect it was for me, making light and making silhouettes and letting the light shine through and letting the shadows become part of the design and part of the magic. So yeah, window film is it's kind of brought things full circle for me. Yeah, I was
going to say, we can actually see it on your window as well, Hannah. When obviously you're giving us your tour, it's great. It's something quite not necessarily quirky, but it helps to brighten it up, even though it's only using natural light. It's just a very simple creative measure that obviously creates a striking finish.
And the magic of it is when the light, the bright sunlight shines through and makes the shadows of all the grasses, and yeah, it's lovely. It seems to have captured people's imaginations, and yeah, it's been a great product.
So typically, how long, if you were having to make a lamp, for instance, by hand, how long would that take you to set it out, to cut it, if you're doing it by hand?
I mean, so James, click on the first one there, the cow parsley, so we'll get the level of detail. I mean, way back in the early days when I was hand cutting every single thing that I made, I didn't make this design. It would have been too intricate for me to cut by hand over and over. So this one has been designed especially with the possibilities of laser cutting in mind. So yeah, it's a really difficult question to answer, how long each one takes, because I make them in batches. I make them in small batches. I'll do all the lasering first, and then I'll do all the sticking, and then we put them through the machine, and then we trim. So, we make quite a lot in a day. I don't really know how long one takes on its own.
I bet you dread to think.
Yeah.
I bet you definitely dread to think what it would have took by hand. Like we've said, it's
I know. I mean, there are some incredible paper cutters around out there doing very, very intricate things, and I did enjoy that craft, and I saw it as my craft. But my body was struggling. I was having a repetitive strain injury in my shoulder, and just the repeating of those cuts over and over again. So then I thought, right, it's time to explore this laser cutting option. And I still didn't have the funds or dare to borrow the funds to buy a machine of my own. And I didn't know how technical you needed to be in order to own one. So I decided to outsource it. And I found a very lovely guy called Bob who lived in Devon. So at the time, like, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, there weren't that many laser cutters around or laser cutting services that I could find easily. Anyway, Bob looked after me for 10 years, but he'd bought that machine as a retirement job. He'd already retired, and this is what he was doing. So it was always in the back of my mind that one day he's going to retire, and what am I going to do then? So I started thinking, well, maybe we could. By this time, I'd moved into this studio, so I had space to house a machine of my own. And the business was good, so I was more confident with my funds and thought I'll try it. And someone came to my open studio and said that someone locally was selling a machine, and So he came and he did some tests for me, and it did pretty well. The first machine that I bought, and we used it here for a year or so, and we got a long way. I mean, we managed to cut the treasures, we managed to cut the papers, but it wasn't as clean a cut as I liked. And I'm talking like literally clean. There was a layer of dust along the edge, and had to buy a dusting booth so I could dust all my shapes down every time I'd made something. I also make these where can you see them best? Bouquets of flowers, and like I could run my fingers down and they'd come out black. So suddenly laser was a mucky job, and I was thinking, it might just be the machine. This might be solved with a higher spec machine. And so I began to do some research and discovered you guys, and now I have a Trotec of my own, and I don't have a dusting booth anymore. It's great.
Well, your first machine was a glass tube machine, so obviously you kind of went down the glass tube route because of the cost implication for you.
Right. To be honest, I didn't know there was a thing as a glass tube or a ceramic tube or a whatever tube. It was just like, oh, this is a laser cutter. I didn't have enough technical knowledge about it. So, yeah.
And also you were trying to get from being creative to being productive, being able to repeat, get the repetition in there.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at the glass tube machines, as we covered earlier on this morning when we did the demonstration with one of ours, what you've not got is the same beam quality. So your beam size might be 0.3, 0.4, maybe 0.5 of a millimeter. Whereas I think now you're working, is it a 1.5 lens?
I think so.
That's
Yeah.
I think it is from the setup. So we're working with a beam width of about 0.15 of a millimeter, really fine. We've got the power tuned to a really kind of short point, so we're just going through the material and not creating as much debris.
Yeah.
And then obviously we're getting rid of jobs instead of creating extra processes. So
absolutely.
like
That's
cleaning
been
card and
amazing.
paper.
Not having to do the dusting is just, it was a horrible job, and it's amazing not to have to do that anymore. When I first got this machine, I described the difference was between, my old machine was like drawing with a fat marker, and this was like drawing with a fine liner pen. As the level of detail was so precise and lovely, and just what I need in my work, because I'm all about the detail.
A bit of a perfectionist.
Quote.
Just a little bit.
Absolutely.
So have you found, since you've obviously using the other machine, you're having to draw things, were you having to convert your drawings to suit the other machine? Because you mentioned Corel Draw, you mentioned Illustrator, and we know that obviously you can go straight into the machine with that. So that, has that been a time saving?
Definitely, yeah. We had to put in my old machine, all my drawings were set up in Corel files, but we had to set them up as, what are they called? EPs? So long ago now, I've forgotten. EPS, yes. And that was fiddly. But I really like being able to work directly from Corel. Been using Corel for like all my computer life, yeah, it's natural for me, and it's really nice to just be able to press print and go straight to the laser.
So has that made your life easier, as in going from pencil drawing, electronic drawing, and then into production?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good.
Much smoother, much more enjoyable.
I have got with me is there you go. So
there we go.
Did is, how's that coming through, guys?
Looks great.
Yeah.
Obviously, we asked Hannah to commission 6 lamps, one for each of our showrooms, just because it's a really interesting application. And again, it's working with a really difficult material because of the delicacy of it. in terms of engraving it to produce light, cutting it, scoring it, marking it. In fact, I quite like that one in the background. I think we'll leave that on.
Better leave it on.
Just
Yeah, I like that. Has there been any questions come through yet, James?
We have actually got a few, Trev, yeah, but I think because we've still got a bit of time, one of the things I would actually personally like to ask Hannah is obviously, what's the most, even personal wise, if it's not laser related or just, whether you've been hand cutting or whatever, what's the most interesting thing you've ever actually just designed?
Well, I suppose that's in the eye of the beholder. It's a hard question to answer, right? It's a tricky one, James, to sum up. But I can't find a favourite. Everything is special in my heart along the way. But when we first got the laser and we were cutting out all the little tiny treasures, we were ever so excited about them. It was like the designs were suddenly coming to life. The designs that had been on flat wallpapers and on the lamp designs were suddenly, you could hold them in our hands and string them together and create big displays. And that felt like an exciting departure and the first possible exciting new thing that could come out of the laser. So, but I never know what's going to come next. I'm excited, just very excited about my little pebbles now, and I don't know what they're going to be. But that's how the treasures started out. Don't know what they're going to be, but there's something exciting about this. So I'm just going to keep experimenting and keep playing. So who knows? It's hard to say what my favourite, most impressive thing is.
No, that's cool.
Oh, sorry, James.
No, it's all right, Trevor. I was just going to say, I suppose that's another benefit you've got, Hannah, is the fact that now you've got your laser as well. You can just kind of tinker and test things yourself as opposed to having to think, I've got a really solid idea, I need to get that out, as opposed to, I'm just going to try this and see how it goes.
Exactly. I've been trying really hard this new year to just carve out a bit of time each morning and not do anything else, but just play with new ideas and see where they go. And, then once they go to the machine, because these pebbles are quite intricate, there's a lot of engraving, a lot of cutting, a lot of tiny detail. So get the machine on to cut out the things that I've been playing with in the morning, and then switch on my orders and see what needs doing and see what needs making and see what needs boxing. And it's been, a good couple of weeks of doing that. And it's hard to carve out that creative time when you're running a small business because there's a lot of demands on you, but that creative time is your business's future, isn't it? You've got to keep on making new things, so it's really important to carve it out, and I'm trying really hard to guard that time as precious and as something that needs my attention. So it feels nice. It feels things are flowing. I love being in here when there's lots of little things emerging and then excited to come back the next day to carry on playing and seeing where it goes next. So it's like planting little seeds and waiting for the next thing to grow. But when I got the machine in September, that was obviously the beginning of the dark half of the year. So I make lights, so I do lots of business when the weather is dark and cold. And then with Christmas coming up as well, I didn't really have much time to play at all. So it's nice to be on the other side of that and be experimenting with all the things that I couldn't do. I really want to really push the engrave as far as I can take it, the engrave and the detail and the texture. So this is what I couldn't do when I was having my laser cutting outsourced. And my Bob was brilliant, and he'd always, send me things in the post first class if I was excited about them. Can you test this for me, Bob? But then, of course, I'd have to tweak it and then send it to him again and then wait another couple of days. And so it was a slow, clunky process of play. Whereas now it's like, press go, cut another one out. Oh, let's see what's happening. No, it's very instant. And
yeah, because I suppose you can keep your enthusiasm, can't you, and try something a little bit more power, more speed, do something like that. And
Exactly.
I'm guessing as well, coming through the winter months when you're busy, because that's when lots of people buying lights, it's quite nice as the evenings are starting to get that little bit longer gradually now to be kind of creative, and the seasons are changing a little bit, where you're being so inspired by nature.
Yeah, it's easier in the summer, obviously, because you've got more time of an evening. There's not much time for going out walking and working. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the spring and summer for that.
Definitely, and it's a bit more creative, like you say, inspiration, because I'll show it at the end, but your social media, you've got loads of just nice pictures of around your studio, and it's just, you can see why you're so inspired by nature.
Thank you.
It's nice.
Well, we live in a really amazing place for that. We're in Hebden Bridge, and it's in a deep, steep wooded valley, and literally any way you leave out of the door, you can be in the woods or the meadows or the moors, or so many footpaths, so many woods, so many different places just on different sides of the valley can feel really like you're in a totally new place. So I've got endless things to discover, endless places to walk, and yeah, it's lovely being here.
Yorkshire.
It feeds me well. Yorkshire, indeed.
And I'm left out up in the northeast.
I'm sure it's very nice too.
That's got some good bits, surely.
Some bits, yeah, some bits. No, that's great, Hannah. Thank you very much. So we've actually got a lot of good questions coming in. Actually, a lot for you as well. So I hope you're prepared.
I did say when I did my mail out, you can ask me anything. And my dad sent a message via my mum saying, "Who won the cup final in 1969?" Oh, thanks for that. Very funny.
That question's not here, so don't worry. I think you should be all right with this. So the first one is from Brody. What kind of paper do you use?
I use it's an imitation parchment paper. It's a GF Smith, one of their parchments. It's forgotten what grammage it is now, 130 or 40. I was worried that because they changed their paper, and for years I've been using a paper that was 170 grams, and they changed it and it was a lot thinner, and I was worried that it wasn't going to be all right, but it is really nice. And even though it's very thin, it's very smooth. The reason I chose it is because it still looks it's got a really lovely glow when the light shines through it, and there's not too much grain inside the paper, because sometimes the paper can look lovely to the eye and then you hold it up to the light and it looks a completely different color. So I really like the glow, and I like the feel, the smoothness, and it cuts really beautifully. Yeah.
Brilliant. Next one we've got is from Daphne. Hi Hannah, just lovely. Are you layering positive and negative and cut out areas together on paper and laminating them as one?
That's exactly what I am doing, yes. So I've got quite a few layers. I've got the paper itself in the background, and then I can cut out something from the paper and then stick something on the top. Basically, I do cutting and sticking for a living. And layering up, different motifs. So because I've got the engraving to play with now, like I said before, it's like another layer in the palette. And then the lamination, because I use matte laminating pouches, that again does something else to everything. It kind of glues everything together and creates a lovely another layer of light when it's lit. So yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Brilliant. What this is it's I don't know if you saw it flash up before. It's not a question, but Nathan's saying that he brought one of your lamps 8 years ago.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Nathan. Wonder what shop that was. North Leeds. Oh, was it in the Bowery in Headingley? Perhaps. Yeah, it probably was.
It's still time to drop your answer, Nathan. Let us know where it was. We've got Paul. Paul asks, I haven't clicked that hard. No, there we go. And so once drawn, scanned, and engraved, how do you convert the raster images to cut the external vector profiles of the detailed parts? Also amazing website.
I don't actually know what a raster image is. Sorry to be untechy. What? So I will draw the shape, scan it in, image trace it so that it becomes just one single black hairline, and then it's ready to go. But I'll fiddle with the lines in Corel, so I'll tighten them, shorten them, whatever. And then with the laser software, you assign it a color. So I don't know if you know this about the laser, but you know, if I've got a red line in my drawing, a red hairline, that means that the laser's gonna cut out the shape. If I have a black shape without an outline, it means it's going to engrave. So there's a certain amount of communication needed when setting up the design.
Do you play with the line thickness as well for different effects for the engraving?
I do. I have, yeah. But at the moment, I'm happy with just this one setting and seeing how far I can go with that. Yeah.
I've got a question actually. Are you thinking about starting to look at other materials than papers to try and kind of add to the range of materials that you're working with?
Not at the moment, no, because I just want to get the most out of this one material. Well, I've got the card and the paper, but I've got so many products and so many materials and so many different things. I just want to try and keep it simple at the moment. So I just want to work with the paper that I've got. But no doubt something will excite me in the future, and I'll experiment with new material. But yeah, not yet. Don't freak me out. It's too much to do.
Trevor, it's nearly 5 o'clock. Don't worry.
Let me just turn my light back on. My lights have gone off automatically. There we go. And then there was light.
You're doing a Chris Green trick there, Trev. You're not even in Bolden.
Automatic lighting, it's the future.
Get you to design some of them, Hannah.
Somebody did show me they had it wired up to something or other, and they were like, Google, put the light on, and the light went on. I liked that.
Yeah.
That was good.
There'll be an app on your phone next.
Yeah.
We've got one.
It already is.
Oh no, that's typical. We've got one last question, and this is for you. Well, for general, I guess, Trev, but you'll probably be best placed. How often do you have to service a laser? So I guess maybe in regards to Hannah's application with paper, or just general.
Well, in general, generally speaking, you want to have a look at your machine and service it once a year if you're using it in normal use. So we've got some customers who run their machines 24 hours a day. So they're using it on average 3 times as much as an average person. So some people will have a servicing schedule of every 3 or 4 months because they're working in a real production environment. Whereas with Hannah's machine, annual service. She's got sufficient extraction, because one of the things that we've not talked about is you're using a vacuum table. With working with papers, we want the papers to stay really nice and flat so we can stay in focus and be very delicate with them. So we're using an extractor that's also removing any fumes, any debris, but it's also holding the paper flat for it to be processed. So yeah, annual service, just like you would have your car would have an MOT or an annual service, we would recommend the same with your machine, unless you're using it every hour of every day, in which case alter your servicing schedule pro rata would be my answer to that.
Fantastic advice.
To clean the lenses is quite important. It does make quite a lot of difference to keep the lens clean, and that's really nice and easy with this machine. So yeah, I find with the engrave, it's taking off a layer of the paper, so there's like a fine white powder that gets stuck to things. So keeping that clean, making sure that doesn't like settle on the lens, gives a much cleaner, nicer cut. So I might do that Depends if I'm doing a lot of engrave. I might clean it once a day or once every few days. Depends on how much dirt I'm making.
Well, you tend to find your own cleaning regime, don't you, as you kind of use it. And it's like wearing glasses. If I look after the lenses and keep them clean,
I'm really bad at that.
Unlike me.
Unlike me. Terrible.
If I've got fingerprints, I'm not going to be able to see a thing. So, yeah, cleaning regime, it's as and when. But we tend to recommend once a day. Obviously, it's going to depend on the application and the materials you're working with.
It's with my old machine. I used to hate doing it. It was quite hard to get everything back in line again afterwards. But with this, it feels really efficient, and I feel like I'm really caring for it, and it's really easy, and it's within my capability. And yeah, so I like cleaning the lens. New day, shiny new lens. It's good.
Absolutely. We've got 2 more questions coming, guys, and we've got, I think we maybe go a little bit over, obviously, but oh, that's not the right one. That's thanking David. But yes, thank you for watching, David. Hope to see you in future sessions. Daphne has asked, what is the weight of your card stock that you use for your treasures?
It is from GF Smith, and it is, I can't remember again, but it's thicker than anything that they had in their catalogue. They do what's called a laminating service, where they will stick one sheet to another and make it much thicker. So I think it's like about 700 grams or something. It's quite, I'm sorry, I can't be exact. I don't hold these figures in my head once I've got them. You can always email me, I'll tell you. I can check it out on an invoice. But yeah, they've laminated the 2 thickest kinds together to create something quite thick. I don't know if you can see how thick that is. Anyway, it's nice and chunky.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Hannah. And the final question from Paul. Paul has asked, what bed do you use, obviously, to keep all your little bits and pieces safe when you're cutting?
It's a honeycomb bed, and some things do fall through the holes and I have to go and rescue them. But mostly I'm able to bring them out intact. But yeah, the honeycomb bed is really important for me, because I've got the vacuum bed underneath, so that's doing all the sucking and keeping things flat and extracting. Then there's the honeycomb bed, and everything sits on the top. So I'll take you to it and just show you in case there's somebody who doesn't know what. So this is the honeycomb bed. You can see some bits like left over from cutting earlier. So they just managed to rest on the top, but they do sometimes fall down the hole. That's another thing that I have to clean out. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that answer, Hannah. And unfortunately, it looks like we're at the end of our session, but we could have gone on for a lot longer, but unfortunately, it's the limit of shows. But yeah, thank you very much for sharing it. It's been, I don't want to say enlightening, but I will, because I've got to make fun. But it's don't you shake your head, Nala. I've heard you make worse jokes.
Thanks for inviting me, and thanks everyone for coming, for listening, and for your questions.
No problem at all. Thanks, Hannah.
All right.
Hannah. Before we go, guys, I'm just going to say a couple of things. Definitely make sure, obviously you've seen Hannah's website, but definitely make sure that you follow her on her social media as well. It's Hannah Nunn Studio on both Facebook and Instagram. And as she said, send some inquiries through to her on our website, and we can see lots of nice little, obviously, products. And again, the nature stuff I was talking about, and the fact you can't escape hand cutting, as she's made her cat a little nice little house there with some hand cut windows.
If I could have fit it in the laser cutter, I would have.
Of course.
She wrecked that window last night. She put the window right through it. I had to do some maintenance.
Oh, bless her. Oh dear. But yeah, definitely, guys, check out Hannah's website again. Check out our social media. Give her a like. We're here until Thursday. We've got tomorrow's sessions are on. Trevor's back tomorrow afternoon with Johnny, who they started today off. They're going to be doing another comparison, Q500 v Speedy 400. Alex, who we saw before us, he's back tomorrow morning doing a materials workshop with our consumables director. And in the afternoon, he's back with Andy doing an exclusive large format demonstration. So plenty of good content to be there. You will receive an email tomorrow morning, so make sure you check your inbox for that. And the links to both AM and PM sessions will be in there. And like I say, all sessions are recorded, so make sure to keep an eye out in the future for the email that will come through so you can rewatch them. And definitely make sure if you've got any questions that we didn't get a chance to answer today, or just general ones that come in afterwards, please make sure you drop us a link or an email inquiry to enquiries@troteclayers.co.uk. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us.
If anyone wants to ask anything specific, you can always email me as well.
All right. Hannah as well. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Hannah. Bye.